Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I am your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike the Cranky Fan, and we are here post-Easter, post-opening
Post
day,
post
post
vacation, yeah,
post-vacation, post-UFL kickoff. Spring football has started, which means, this is kind of the ramp up to the draft. If
yeah.
you've
Um,
what, 4 weeks of football before the draft? 3?
I
4?
guess so. Over under for how many quarters I will watch of spring football is probably kind of low, to be very honest. Too much going on right now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's another problem. I think that you have to time this stuff to be like. I don't necessarily know. Like, I agree. We've had this conversation before about the need for a different league, something to develop players. I think we agree that there is some sort of interest on some level of a non-season football season. I just think personally, right now, really from now until like June, there's so much going on. Baseball just started. You're getting ready for the playoffs in basketball, getting ready for the playoffs in hockey. You're coming through, you have the Elite Eight in the Final Four for men's and women's basketball. There's so much that it's like I don't have a free moment to say, all right, I'm going to spend the next 3 hours watching a spring game. It's just so much. Maybe if they made this more of a summer thing, like after the draft, guys that aren't drafted, they could then populate rosters from there. I don't know.
So I've listened to interviews with Daryl Johnston and like other people, and I think that if you asked Danny Garcia, The Rock, and Daryl Johnston and Dean Blandino and whoever else, there's a Russell person that's like the CEO. If you ask them about the timing of the start, I think they would all agree that this was not the best weekend, but disagree on what is the best weekend. I think it's
Mhm.
something that they're trying to figure out, right? Like they talk about having to navigate a bunch of different things. For this year, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact the merger is so many moving parts and a lot of legal stuff that had them really tied up. And so I think their original plan A is to kick off after the Super Bowl and do like an early spring thing while there's still some football fever and you can just kind of extend the football season. I think that's what they wanted to do as plan A, but were unable to do because of the merger starting so late.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily disagree with you. I mean, I think Easter weekend is an abysmal weekend. Let's just put that there. You had 2 games on Easter Sunday. The fact that they got something like 23,000 people to go to those 2 games is pretty wild because,
Yeah.
dude, if I were a kid and I would absolutely want to go to a football game on Easter Sunday, and my parents would never let me do that, ever. Um,
Yeah. I mean, even like a baseball game, like I was down at my parents' house this weekend and I was like, anybody want to go to the Rays game? They thought I was an insane person. So that's not happening. So to go to, and that's a team, they want an established team in an established sport, to say, hey, who wants to go see Memphis in the UFL? And be like, are you out of your mind?
yeah,
uh,
and I mean, they are currently working in select markets where something like going to a football game is not ridiculous, right? Like if you're in Birmingham, Alabama, it's not
that's true.
ridiculous. If you're in
That's
St.
true.
Louis, Missouri, it's a little, I think you can say it's a
Well,
pretty big deal,
I
but
I guess the question would be, if you're the football fan, do you think there'd be more interest for like keeping the wave going after the Super Bowl, or something? It is June 30th. I'm sitting here. My baseball team is 30 games out of first. There's nothing else going on. I'd rather go to see football now.
well, I think it's an interesting question because I think you can make a strong argument for starting right after the Super Bowl. My initial thought, me being me, you and I are from up north. I don't want to sit in a goddamn spring football game in February. I don't want to go to that game. You know what I mean? Like
Go
it's cold. Uh, as it is, I've been to a baseball game on opening day up here in Queens, and it's cold. I don't enjoy
Yeah,
it, and
yeah.
that's like late March. So I think for a weather perspective, late March is right. I think they chose that they didn't want to go up against March Madness. I think.
Well, let's look at it from the bigger picture. I mean, attendance is one thing, but these leagues are going to live and die based on if people watch on TV.
Right,
So,
but hang on. There's another argument to this in that people aren't going to watch on TV if they see empty stands. I mean, that was a point kind of proven by the USFL having empty stands. It looks bad on TV when you've got an empty stadium. So
yeah.
it's a little bit of both. It really is. So I actually agree with you. I have no problem. The USFL, I forget when they kicked off. I want to say it was late April last year. But they had their championship game on 4th of July weekend. I think that sounds awesome. I think that's perfect. I mean, you just get fireworks, a weekend where nobody does anything. There's no set like protocol for what you do on 4th of July weekend. It doesn't matter. You can be with friends or family or whatever.
I'm just looking at it as far as like the landscape, and to me, the barren part of the sports calendar really is, from when the Stanley Cup Finals, the NBA Finals end until you get into football starting in September. I mean, you have baseball, and then you have MLS, and the MLS audience is not moving the needle based on choices and decisions people have to make. So to me, it's just, again, for the people, empty seats may be an issue with them, but at the end of the day, it's like, are you more likely to spend a Saturday afternoon, with not as many choices to watch that, as opposed to like it's going to get lost. Next month when we get into the playoffs and stuff, it's going to be completely lost, and especially in markets like this where now it's not even going to register a blip in ratings.
Yeah, but I don't think that we're really the market that they're aiming for year one. But also, I mean, you're talking about, when you said playoffs, I had to even think about what sport you're talking about. Like the NBA playoffs only matter to the teams in it.
That's not true. I mean, look at the ratings. That's not true.
Okay, well, the NHL playoffs, I can tell you, matter to almost nobody, including the markets that they're in. So, I mean, they're not worried about certain things. I think they're worried about March Madness first and foremost, which is why they waited till it was mostly over. And I don't know, I don't know, but like the Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, I don't think they actually went up against anything big.
This past weekend was, other than tournament games, that's the biggest thing that was going on this past weekend. But you also, you have things coming up like the Masters is a huge.
Yeah, and Daryl Johnson mentioned that. He said that we have to pick our poison with what we're going up against, because you're never really going up against nothing.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, of course, there's always going to be something, but to me, like your best chance to get attention on it, and if not necessarily eyeballs, is when there's lack of clutter for everything else. And I think now until June, there's a lot of clutter.
I would agree. Yeah, and there's also a shitload of NASCAR going on right now.
Yeah, even NASCAR. I mean, at a lower level, for the places you're talking about, like where college football is king, you may not think so up here, but like college baseball is kind of important. Like in LSU, huge. And again, it's something else you're taking attention away from. All right, I'm going to get into this. People are listening to podcasts about basketball and hockey, and those are things they're taking away from. How do I get into this league, and how do I get into this? I mean, I don't know. They'll figure it out. What's going to be the right niche for it? But personally, for me, I would have pushed it out a little further.
Yeah. I don't think that there's a perfect solution. This isn't my solution. Like I said, I probably would have done right after the draft and went with that fervor instead. I think that's a better time to gain momentum, late April.
Like I said too, with that, I mean, now you could start stocking rosters with guys that weren't drafted.
Yeah, with what? What are you talking? Oh, no, that's not how that's going to work, though. If you're starting, then they're not going to have any practice. Those guys that didn't get drafted, they're working towards being an undrafted free agent and stuff like that. If they're going to do the spring football thing, they need to like ramp into it. I think the bigger thing is that they don't see that as being the development cycle that's proper, because then you have players playing until like July, and then they're going right into training camp if they get signed. So it's nonstop football.
That's what I meant. I meant guys that.
That's what I'm saying. I know what you said. I'm saying they're guys that they are developing. They don't want to do it that late because they put them into an impossible situation to transition to the NFL. I know what you're saying. The guys who didn't get drafted can then play in the league, but it's too quick of a turnaround.
Yeah.
There are going to be established teams. I think that they're unrelated ideas.
Oh no! What I meant was, guy is not drafted and is not signed. He's not an unsigned free agent. And it's like, well, now what? Well, this is an option, and they can start playing right away.
Yeah.
And they play that season, and maybe, again, these guys we're looking at are developmental guys. If you're not good enough to be, even an unsigned, you play that season until August, and maybe you spend it, you get. Again, this has to be in concert with the NFL. I'm thinking of this as we're making this up now, but maybe there's some sort of way the NFL has like 2 or 3 roster spots for guys, almost like you're on our roster, you're not even the practice squad, you come from this development league, who you play that first rookie season, we have your rights, but you're not playing until then you get into the groove with the real team for off-season workouts or something. I think there's something that could be worked out if the NFL wants to really buy into this being a developmental league. I mean, that's something we don't know yet either. We would like it to be, but you know, we don't know what that kind of coordination, if there or even communication is between the two.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's too late. I don't think that that's going to work. But
Yeah,
like I said, it's a delicate thing because the NFL has intentionally taken up a large portion of the calendar, and all the other spots are filled with other American
yeah,
sports, which would be basketball and baseball, essentially, and NASCAR.
yeah, yeah,
So there is no perfect solution. They have to bank on football being popular, and the fact that it's only played on weekends. So if you follow a specific baseball team, and maybe you won't even have to choose because your team will be playing at 7:00 on Saturday and they have Sunday off. You know what I mean? Like I think they just have to worry about that.
really accessible for gambling. That's the other option too.
I mean, everything's accessible. They can get darts on TV at this point, I think, by just putting lines at the bottom. At this point, sports live and die by gambling, so the more you can get that integrated, the better. And the fact that ESPN now has ESPN Bet and they're broadcasting this, which, by the way, I've watched more ESPN than I care for this past weekend, watching 2 UFL games on it. God, they are bad. They have the worst broadcasters, I swear. What has happened to that network since I was a child?
We'll do another off-season episode of how much I hate ESPN and how they've ruined everything. But
it's amazing that the worldwide leader in sports has become the worst broadcasting company of them all. But in any case, Giants news. This is just Giants.
Oh yeah.
15 minutes on UFL was not my intention by saying I watched some games. But owners meeting this past weekend. I don't think that's that interesting. I think that this is one of the most boring, you're looking too hard at things kind of situations.
I don't think it's boring. I just think it's completely meaningless and irrelevant. I think people listen to, just because John Mara opens his mouth and words fly out of it, people take what he says as gospel. I mean, again, we are in prime smokescreen season, and
also
nope.
This meeting is in prime smokescreen season every single year.
Yeah,
this is practiced at this point.
Nobody from the owner to the general manager to a scout to any coach is going to unzip their fly and show you their junk. And we are trying to get the best player possible based on the position we will be drafting and the best value and the best player. They are not going to tip their hand but too much by telling you what is in our playbook and what our strategy is. So anything that's said, if Mara says, I'm not going to stand in the way of us drafting a quarterback, that doesn't mean anything. That you shouldn't take that as, oh, they are drafting a quarterback, because if they really want to draft a quarterback, they are not tipping their hand and letting somebody pass them in a trade or pick the guy they may be interested in. It's just, and people just every single year fall into this trap. And so, great if they want to talk, great. I mean, I know Dable didn't say shit in his things, and Mara, nicely spoke. I don't ever need to hear these guys speak ever, and especially right around the draft. Just keep your trap shut, and let's draft.
I think that we're lucky as Giants fans to not have a Trumpian owner, and by that I mean just like Jim Irsay. Just somebody who's just, what will he say next? You know what I mean? Like, he is a very boring owner when you get down to it. And like he's not very excitable. He's very uneventful as an owner, and it makes these things a little less chaotic because I know he's opening his mouth and just drivel is coming out. You know what I mean? He's never
Yeah.
really tipping. He's never really saying anything when you listen anyway. A lot of it to me feels like retroactive connecting of dots. Like, oh, he said this at the owners meeting, and then afterwards they did this. So I'm just like sort of. I don't know.
Like it's like
Draft day is its own animal. It's a living organism that changes as the day goes on. There's no way you're gonna connect shit from.
well, it all goes back to what we always say is that if you have a belief, if you are not in the Daniel Jones camp, probably from day one, you want a new quarterback. Period. And you are going to glom on to any little piece of news, rumor, innuendo, smokescreen, whatever that's going to allow you to believe that they are going to draft another quarterback and get a new one in here. It's all about what you want to believe and what you want your narrative to happen. So when Mara says something as innocuous as like, I wouldn't stand in the way of a trade, of drafting a quarterback, which is not actually saying he's telling them to do it or anything, that's music to your ears and you're going to run with it. And it's like, I told you so. You guys were wrong. I was right. All of, everybody wants their own validation and they just want what they want. And, that's not just Giant fan. That's called being a fan, period. You just have to take away that ego you have of what you want and what you think is right and let these guys do their jobs. The bottom line is these guys have to do their jobs. They have to do their evaluations. They have to put on their big board who they value from here to here. And drafts actually have to happen. Picks have to start happening. They react when they make their moves. That's all this thing is. This isn't this master, 3D checker chessboard of figuring out how to get the pick you want. It's proactive and reactive at the same time based on the conditions around him. That's it.
And I think honestly, the quote, "I'm not going to stand in the way of them drafting a quarterback," is pretty much synonymous with what I think is an old quote from John Mara, which was pretty much that essentially that Joe Schoen is in charge. Those two sentences are the same thing, really. I mean,
And
like I hired this GM for a reason. I want him to make the decisions while I own the team.
yeah,
That is
you
the same
said,
thing as saying I'm not going to get in the way of you making a decision on a quarterback. It's the
and
same shit.
and that's more important to me that you made the comment about having an Ursi as an owner who says crazy shit, and you have to kind of like circle the wagons behind it. I'd rather have a crazy guy like Ursi saying foolish things than having a maniac like Al Davis or Jerry Jones or who just think they are GMs and think they are football people and just are hiring and firing at whims. They are trying to do fantasy football and stuff. So him saying, inferring pretty much that Joe Shane's in charge is that should be the most comforting thing as a Giant fan is, you know, whatever you think of the Maras, where you think they've done a bad job or good job hiring GMs or coaches, they hire guys and let them do their thing. Um, you know, Jury is out whether Joe Shane and Dable and Kafka and company were good hires or not. We'll see at the end of their tenures, but at least he's handing over football operations to these guys and letting them do their thing without being, the guy behind the curtain making all different moves.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of weird to say, but I am kind of happy that there's an owner that we have an owner that's not you know a maniac. Like the fact that it's just like,
Hmm?
is John Mara kind of a meddler? Like the fact that you have to ask and it's kind of a meddler, that's enough to tell me like not more than the next guy. You know, at
Oh, I
some
mean,
point the owner of a Corvette cares about the kind of oil you put in it. You know what I mean?
right. I mean, the fact of the fact you should be raising eyebrows about this ownership group is because we've had a run of, not talking about Dable necessarily, but we've had a run of bad hires at head coach. And, this team has been, you take away it's two big things not to take away from it. You take away those two Super Bowls, this has been a pretty bad organization for a long time. And, shit flows downhill. So, I mean, but that's different than just being a guy who thinks he's in charge and thinks this team's in bad shape. Because I mean, this is not a James Dolan situation with the Knicks by any stretch, where he thinks he's, at some level is kind of a de facto GM. We don't have that.
I will say also, I'm willing to give John Mara some credit that I don't think has been mentioned in a while. In that, he's bucking trend a little bit by going with Joe Shane. He is outside the family, very much
Yeah.
so. I mean, he rode Jerry Reese and Mark Ross far too long. I think the two of them had proven that they were bad at their jobs for quite a while. Mark Ross way more so than Jerry Reese. But then, dipped into the well, brought back Dave Gettleman, kept that family approach to everything. And when that was clear that that wasn't working, he didn't just switch to somebody outside the family. He took somebody who came in there and just gutted the place. And then also kind of smoked out a few more that John Mara wasn't willing to get rid of, or that, somebody didn't turn over. So, like, credit where credit's due. John Mara is thinking outside of the box. He's going beyond what his father did before him. You know what I mean? Like, he is trying new things. So,
Well, I wonder also how much of an influence, like the Tisch side of the ownership group, is kind of involving this too, because they have a voice,
that's a great point.
and maybe they're kind of like, hey, enough's enough. We've kind of deferred, running of this organization to you guys, but we do have a voice in this thing, and I think we need to kind of reevaluate how this is all being done. So, it's possible. I have no proof of that, or I'm not in those owners' meetings or anything, but they are 50-50 owners.
Tisch doesn't show up often, but whenever he does have something to say. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
he's got an answer for questions, and he's got a quote ready. You know what I mean? Like, anytime he's asked, he comes away with a quote. So,
Sure.
I
Yeah.
agree with you.
Mhm.
Getting into today's conversation, as we mosey through the Giants roster going into 2024 and heading towards the draft, we're going to take a look at safeties and DBs. I look at safeties in today's NFL's defenses as kind of interchangeable with inside corners or slot corners or whatever, box safety. I mean, like, that's just kind of the way the defenses are being constructed now, is just getting as many DBs on the field as possible. And they have different skill sets from outside corners, and so safeties are often interchangeable with corners, nickel corners, I mean. So I kind of group them all together, because as injuries happen and depth is needed, that's really the well that you're often pulling from, and less so grabbing some, 6'1", 34-inch armed outside corner to play nickel corner. So
Makes sense.
going through this, the Giants players from 2023. Let's start with the biggest one. The biggest one that was on the table was Xavier McKinney. A second-round pick was taken at the top of the second round. I believe we traded up to that spot to get him, perhaps, or maybe he just fell to us.
I believe he traded up for him.
I know he did for Landon Collins. I'm not sure. Regardless, deal was expiring. Had kind of he's a great player. I think he's an intelligent guy on the field. Bit of a rocky off the field tenure with the Giants, but I would say rocky. I wouldn't say pathetic or dismal or a disaster.
I would say more headline grabbing than disaster or rocky. I think
the hand thing is kind of rocky.
Yeah, I think also knowing more now what the state of the room was for the defense with coaches and everything, it maybe you put a little more perspective. But I'd say
I would agree with that.
Yeah, at where we both probably 6 months ago were like, is this guy threatening the composure in the locker room and the camaraderie and all that stuff? Now maybe,
he might have been the one thing holding the two teams together.
Yeah, he might have been the one preventing people from getting the shit beat out of each other too. So, yeah, that to me, if I'm grouping all the things like age, contract, availability, performance, X factory leadership, we'll put the rule under that, to me is pretty low on my priority list of evaluating what he is.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would agree with that. But nevertheless, when he's coming up for a contract, all of those things get inflated, right? Like, you start looking at all the setback. Like, when you can't afford someone, or money's going to be a problem, you need to make the financial decisions. All of the shortcomings come, exploding with, I don't know. They multiplied. They're exponentially worse, right? So like his lack of leadership certainly gets inflated. But I think more than anything, if you want to keep it on the field, his tackling sucks. Tackling is not good. I think it's probably the worst part of his game. And you know, I think that he has enough speed to be kind of like a center field safety, but he doesn't have the best speed to be a center field safety. It's kind of like he can do that. Should he always do that? I'm not so sure. He's certainly got the intelligence to make up for some of the speed he's lacking. I don't know. But I think the biggest thing for me is that like he's going to command a giant contract, and this is a safety that doesn't tackle well. That's a problem for me. I don't know. Maybe I'm like an old man. I think I've become an old man with form tackling.
I think when you're talking about someone's going to be one of the highest paid safeties in the league, and especially you have a new defensive coordinator coming in, I think sometimes, and we're not, once again, we're not at that, we're this close away from being in the conference finals or, even a Super Bowl or anything. It's like, it comes to like, is he a guy you build around? I mean, this is kind of what this exercise is. Is he a build around guy for the future, or is he a good for now? And, I actually had him as a build around. I thought that, for all the shortcomings he might have, he's still one of the best players we had on defense, and he's getting into the prime of his career. And, unless there was a discussion with, the new defensive coordinator and, everything top of the line, there were questions. Maybe they just said, if there's too many questions, let's move on. So.
And I think that's possible. I think that the safety position is going to be really important in this defense. We had Byard in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. I think that that's certainly possible, but I have him as a build around / good for now. I think Xavier McKinney is a build around guy. I just don't know if he's a build around guy for this defense coming in. And I think that there's a chance that he's less of a build around guy with this organization, with this coaching staff, based on what happened, in his tenure here. It's kind of an intangible, maybe less his fault, more so circumstantial thing, but I think that it factors in financially. Like if he were the guy who really truly kept the locker room together or something throughout all of last year, if he was like presented like a good teammate face to the media, if he was on the field seen keeping things together, you know what I mean? Like if it was clear that he was a standalone leader in a turmoil locker room, maybe there would, the fact that he
it adds a little bit more of a case. I just don't know if you're going to spend that much money for a guy where that's, we weren't really sure about your performance on the field or anything, but something, you're such a good guy.
No, that's not what I mean. I think it's like, if he demonstrated immense character during all that, where you could say it's like, if it weren't for his, there's something to him. There is that intangible that is worth keeping him.
Basically, yeah.
There's something to him that's worth keeping, but that was going to be the only thing that was going to save him, I think. I think just like the circumstances around the timing of his contract expiring were just bad, and that's that. Right?
Let me ask you a question. If Wink is still here, is he still here?
No, I think he happened to be part of a central part of their problem.
I meant, the assumption that Wink is still here, meaning, there's no internal issues between Wink and Dable. I mean, like, it's an alternate universe where, Wink is working out with Dable. They're in, they're kumbaya,
But everything else from last year still stands. All the injuries, whatever. Then I think that you look at the defense as a whole last year, and you can't really say it was bad. I mean, you can't. You can't say necessarily that it was great. There were a couple times they got whooped, but you can say, well, there are still some weak spots on the roster back there. If we lose McKinney, it's going to get even weaker. But this was a good defense last year. Xavier McKinney is a good part of that defense. He was a captain. So yeah, I think that if you're taking the shenanigans out of last year and you're just leaving the bad luck and the injuries and the result, then I think you don't do anything to harm the defense that kept us fairly relevant. You know what I mean? Like there's no way Tommy DeVito wins a Monday Night Football game without this defense.
I agree. 100% agree.
Even though that defense gave up a lead pretty late. That might have been the worst example of a DeVito game. In any case, McKinney's a great player, bad timing. And I think that's kind of it. Signed a 4-year deal with Green Bay, way more than we were going to spend.
Yep.
Just is exactly what it is. Let's flip to the other starting safety, Jason Pinnock. He is in his contract year this year. He is only 25 years old. I have him as a build-around / good-for-now guy. And that sounds kind of silly, but what I'm saying is there's no reason not to extend this dude. He's 25. He emerged as a playmaker last year, had some key interceptions. He doesn't make too many big-time mistakes. He's clearly very athletic. He's not currently catching, national name, attention, fame, but you always want to extend guys before that happens. Now, do you want to extend him now? Maybe not. You got a new defensive coordinator coming in here. I think that his traits translate to what you'd want, where he's really fast, he's really rangy, he can probably play center field. I don't know if he has the IQ to be a center field guy. Is he going to make the wrong decision? Get beaten behind, something like that. I'm not totally sure. So maybe you want to extend him throughout the year. But nevertheless, I think that he is young talent that is emerging, and you want to get ahead of that before his market value moves up. So I think that, in my opinion, you evaluate him throughout training camp. If he wins that starting spot, like I think that he will, and he starts performing in the first couple of weeks, then you start thinking about extending him, because you don't want 2 empty spots in the backfield. And if he's emerging like I think he might be, you want to get ahead of that. I'm interested in your thoughts on him. I don't think you're.
That's interesting, because you went from, if he wins a starting spot, let's extend him.
Well, hang on. There's a couple things here. It's a new defensive coordinator, so nobody is set in stone for anything. No starting spots.
But nobody's set in stone, but you kind of have leanings to who you think your starters could be.
And I am leaning that way. He won a starting spot in literally one preseason game last year, and he never lost it last year. I think the more interesting thing is, so for me, he's really a good for now, but how can he be good for now if he's in his contract year? Is kind of how I looked at it. So he is somewhere leaning towards build around, I think. I do think that he wins a starting spot. I do think that he continues to be a playmaker coming up. I'm just making that prediction based on his slow emergence.
My thought process of someone as a good for now versus a build around guy is having him on the roster influencing my decision making when it comes to draft time or free agency. So a build around tells me I'm set with this guy. This guy, we're going to try to re-sign him after next year. This is the guy we found our solution. He's it. As my good for now is, he's going to start probably this year. But if I have the option to draft better and he's on the table, I'm going to take him.
Well, here's the thing though. You got 2 safety spots and only one of them's open. So if you have an option to draft better, you're going to take him, but he's going to start opposite him.
I know, but I'm talking hyper specific to him. I know what the entire room is and everything, but I'm saying if I have the option to draft, a safety to replace him, I'm not going to say no. I have my guy, and that to me is that's what to me a build around person is, and I don't think he's there for me just yet.
No, I think he's in between that.
And that's fine. And I think we're both kind of in the same place with it. I am wait and see. I don't think we have to make that decision about. He's certainly not a move on guy. Mm-mm. I think move on guy to me is this guy is not cutting it, and we need to upgrade this position immediately. I don't think we need to upgrade it with him immediately, but also I don't know if he's the guy. I mean, I think after this year we'll definitely have a more definitive answer with him for sure.
Yeah, like I said, he's a presumptive starter for me, mainly due to numbers and the fact that he had the position last year. I think he'll be an open competition with some other people, but I expect. My thing is that I think that he is going to continue to get better. He's gotten better every step of the way. He's been so. I think
certainly jump classes and go from a good to now to a absolutely.
Yeah,
If he's trending
but I
upward.
mean, he's never going to be, in my opinion, like an Andrew Thomas level of build around. But he's certainly possible by the middle of this year to be like, next year maybe we worry more about tight end than safety. You know what I mean? Like I think
Yeah.
it might change your pecking order of
Yep.
off-season needs or something
And
like
that's
that.
why I think we're going to do this exercise every year going forward to see how,
Yeah, I
you
like
know,
this.
how each individual kind of shifts around. Yeah.
I'm going to switch over to Dane Belton, who kind of was the first backup, I guess. He's signed
Hmm.
through 2025. I have him kind of as a good for now. I'd like to see him in this new defense. I think that Dane Belton's like an interesting guy because he doesn't really do anything exceptionally well
Hmm.
or exceptionally badly, but he isn't like a natural ball hawk. Like he just happens to be around the ball a lot. Uh,
I think the Giants have a lot of guys who kind of fit into this category too of they're good for nows because I still let's see what happens with them in the this year, next year, year after type of thing where
right.
we're not throwing the we're not they haven't said okay this guy is as a bust and I'm ready to move on or I think they just have to still be kept in the oven for a couple more minutes as they still cook. And he's a good example for that. This is a a good for now in pen.
Yeah, I actually really like Dane Belton. I think he's a perfect third safety to come onto the field, and for whatever reason, I think maybe it's just he's on the field, 24 is on the field. Let's aim at him, and for whatever reason, testing him always seems to end pretty badly. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but he'll go on the field for one play and he'll have like a pass breakup or something. It's crazy.
Hmm.
Um, Let's move forward to Javarius Owens was drafted last year, signed through 2026. Again, like this is a hard one to grade, or value, assess his value to the team. But it's easy to simply say, based on his age, his cap number, and the security we have with him, the fact that he's mainly special teams and he's like a backup kind of safety, good for now. There's no reason to make any sort of strong decision about him. His destiny is entirely in his hands, in my opinion.
I had him as a move on,
Ooh, interesting.
but I didn't really. I'm not gonna die on the hill for it. I just felt like for someone that is kind of more of a special teamer guy and a backup guy, maybe we could find one a little, maybe a little younger or even cheaper. I mean, I don't think he's a serious drain on the salary cap as it is, but to me, that's kind of a you know what is our reasonable expectation for what his peak performance going to be?
I
Do
could see him. You mean on like on defense?
yeah,
I mean, everyone's going to get a fair shake. I think probably with this new defensive coordinator. So I think it's kind of up to him. Some of the things I've seen from him, remember last year Bobby Skinner put out a really good video on him. Probably almost a year ago today. Probably like right
mhm,
after the draft, he probably did it. Um, he has some talent, you know what I mean? Like, and I think given an opportunity, a full year in an NFL weight room with NFL meetings, and keep in mind, defensive back meetings under Wink Martindale had to have been like
my God,
calculus for a geometry student. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm sure that he is twice as intelligent as he was, day one walking into this building. So, um, you know, my expectations for him are a complete question mark. Like he could be if he has not improved at all from last year, and he is strictly a special teams player that does well based on his just natural ability, and he's like a backup player, then I think that that's fine. I think that that's a need that the team has is that spot, like a good special
mhm,
teams player and backup player. But I do think that the ball is in his court to rise beyond that.
yeah,
Like I said, he had traits coming in here, and I didn't even think he was going to sign to the active roster. I'm pretty sure neither one of us predicted him to be like on
we
the
didn't,
53, and he was.
yeah.
So that I think that says a lot of our expectations versus his reality, and he could rise beyond that. It wouldn't shock me if he did. Like I said, everyone's going to get a fair shake in this defense, I think.
Yeah, I guess, when you're starting to get towards like 50, 51, 52, 53 on the roster, that's where I'm going to be a little harsher on you have to you have to show something for me enough to say you're not just a move on, you're at the bottom of the roster. You showed me something where you could be, a player at some point on this team. And I guess maybe I don't have that little something that's like, with him. And that's okay. I
No,
mean,
that's okay.
again, we're
I think
talking
what's
about guys at the bottom of the roster as opposed to.
no, but you make an interesting point, man. I'm thinking about this now. Like the relaxed practice squad rules. Like, do you really want your 51 through 53 to be special teams guys anymore? With the relaxed rules, do you want to just like have your good special teams, or I guess not your special teams aces or anything, but like your core like quality special teams, like just strong players on your practice squad, and just
Well,
make them elevations? I don't know.
well, I guess special teams are going to be a lot different next year.
That's
And,
a good point too.
with the new rules, which we really haven't talked about on this, there may be a whole new skill set required to be a special teamer,
Hmm.
especially on kickoffs. The gunner is not nearly, a guy who just hauls ass down the field is not as important anymore. It's more about tackling now and different things. So I think we're going to have to see how it plays out, how the new kickoff rules are, how coaches and special teams coordinators game plan for it, and how it's actually just playing out before I think these decisions really are made. So we're a little bit in flux right now.
Yeah, it is a good point. I'm interested to see how the traits of a special teamer are adjusted to the new cook. I mean, if it stays.
Because let's be honest, I mean, the way special teams are trending, that there's going to be more and more kickoffs and less punts. I mean, more people go for it on fourth down where they're punting. Teams score more, so there's more kickoffs after the fact. You know, just something just to keep an eye on this year. And again, this is year one of it, but it's a pretty big change to the game.
It's yeah. I mean, well, we'll see. We'll see because I don't think they move the ball back, so I think you're still going to see a shitload of touchbacks.
Isn't there something where if it's a touchback, it's a bigger penalty now? Like, are they moving it like to the 35 or something? I thought I read it's like they don't want touchbacks. They want actual
Should have just moved the
returns.
ball back. I don't. The NFL and its
They don't
infinite wisdom of
because
just
they don't
circling itself in red tape.
because they don't want all the this stuff happening. They want it to be more of like a football play than just 300-pound guys just crashing into each other, at full speed. I don't know. They're trying to.
I mean, like you could do both, though. I mean, like you'd have them not move until you know what I mean, and also keep the ball back
Yeah,
so that it's
yeah.
not going into the end zone every time. I don't know.
What they're doing this year will not be the final solution to this. I can guarantee there'll
Yeah,
be
I don't
more
think so
tweaks
either.
going forward. This is a radical change, and let's see if they tweak again next year or 2 years or 5 years.
Guaranteed that Hall of Fame game, I'm gonna read 28 billion tweets about how bad it is. The kickoff rule.
Oh, of course, absolutely. You'll hear about how bad the turf is there, and they'll complain about that.
Um, Jalen Mills signed this year for 1 year, $1.2 million. He's not going to be a build around guy, right? Because he signed him for 1 year. He's obviously
Hmm.
not a move on guy. You just bought him. He's a good for now guy, and he is as good for now gets. He is signed for exactly as long as they wanted him, for exactly as much as they wanted him. He's turning 30 years old. He's veteran guy. He's veteran
Hmm.
depth. He's veteran intelligence. He's leadership in the defensive backfield because there isn't any. There is no leadership in this defensive backfield because there's the longest tenured guy is what, Darnay Holmes, I think.
I believe so. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, that's literally good for now because we just got him, and they feel he's good for now.
yes.
There's that's the literal definition as well. We got him for 1 year. You're good for now.
More interesting, the Giants re-signed Darnay Holmes to a 1 year, $1.2 million contract against the cap. I think he actually made a little bit more than that. I think that this is. I don't think Giants fans are wrong or misguided by a groan to this re-signing. Darnay Holmes has not been stellar, but I would say that he's not been stellar in Wink Martindale's defense, which I would have never billed him up to be coming out of UCLA. Darnay Holmes is not a sticky man corner. I could have told you that. But he is a very good off-man corner. And from what I understand in this defense, there will be a lot more off coverage. It allows the defensive backs to play as off as they are comfortable with, knowing their own skill set. So they can keep themselves at a hypothetical arm's reach or a leg's reach as much as they're comfortable with closing in on the ball. So he was very good at that in Patrick Graham's defense. I would say he was an ascending talent in Patrick Graham's defense. You switch to Wink's defense, and it's a completely different coverage philosophy where you're going to stick right with a guy where he's shorter than most receivers. He's not a super long guy or anything like that. He's not the fastest long speed, and he's just not as good at mirroring movements that closely. He's going to lose at cut points in the route. I think that this is probably going to be a much better defense for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is a pivotal part of the defense at some point in this year. I don't know how long we're going to be relevant, so I'll just say that.
I had him as a very soft and pencil move on, but again, another one I'm not going to die on the hill of saying, we got to get rid of this guy. So again, and with a new defensive coordinator and a change in defense, I'm going to give even the move on guys a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. So like a wait and see. I think we'll have better answers next year during this evaluation of this is the scheme we're running. This is the trends we like to do. These are, this looks like a guy for this system type of thing. So I have him as a move on, but I really don't have that much conviction towards it.
Sliding forward, Cordell Flott signed through 2025. He's on his rookie deal, so he's good for now no matter what. His roster spot is not impacting anything that I do. I'm at good for now and leaning kind of towards move on. Remember, he's super duper young. So there is that as well. But I also, and I might die on this hill. I might be dead on this hill. In that I think that Cordell Flott looks more comfortable, looks better on the outside perimeter playing corner than he does on the inside. I think he looks flustered on the inside. I think that he looks a little bit lost at times on the inside. And when he's on the outside and his job is to just cover the guy in front of him, I think he does a pretty good job. He stood up against A.J. Brown pretty well. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a nobody receiver. That's a very good receiver on a very good team.
I have on my notes here, I have good for now,
Okay, fair enough.
To me, the best things he has going for him is the fact he's still young, he's still cheap.
Mm-hmm.
If he was, going to be a free agent this year, I would probably have him in the move on category. Like, I think I've seen enough. I think there's still, we thought he was kind of a development project when we drafted him, right?
Yes.
So a development project means you have to develop him, and it doesn't happen overnight. It might take, for some guys, 2 years, some guys 4 years. I think he's going to have that opportunity. And again, for the reasons why we said, he's cheap, he's young. There's no reason to get rid of him now. He's not embarrassing himself out there. But again, I don't think he's a factor in, going into draft weekend, maybe trying to upgrade where he is. So that to me is he's a good for now. We'll think about him again next year.
And last on the list is Aaron Robinson in a contract year this year. He is 26 years old. I have him as move on. Who the hell is Aaron Robinson? We have not seen this guy in forever. And it's a damn shame because I like the skill set that Aaron Robinson has. I think he's an excellent slot corner. From what I saw at UCF, I think. Mm-hmm. I know he transferred out of Alabama. I want to say UCF.
Right. He ended up at UCF, yeah.
Yeah. I really liked him, especially. I really liked him for Wink's defense. And we got to see him in the slot role 0 times and on the outside where he does not belong a couple of times. And he got injured, got better for like a few snaps, and then got injured again. And he's been injured ever since. I have to think that at 26 years old, spending like 2 years straight up injured, his time is pretty much shot. We were talking about spring football for all of 10 minutes at the start of this. Maybe that's his chance to reclaim a couple of years in the NFL. Maybe next year, not this upcoming season. Maybe the 2025 UFL season. He goes there, has a great time there where he is a star, and he can reclaim at 28 years old a couple of NFL years on a good contract with some health and some good luck. Maybe. I was really excited about him, and he didn't embarrass himself really on the field. He just hasn't been on the field, and there's no dependability if you can't be dependent on to be on the field.
I have him as a move on for those exact same reasons. He's not 23, who injured last year and still has plenty of time. He's 26, and coming back from an ACL, that's a pretty significant injury, and you're relying on explosiveness and speed that could impact it. We don't know what he's going to be like back on the field again. So I have him as a move on.
Yeah, I think it would be foolish to put him as anything else.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
No, I don't think the Giants are really going to be spending any longer. I think that their spending window has shut pretty tightly, but a couple guys that maybe they can move money around to solve this roster hole problem if they're unable to do so in the draft. I'm going to throw some names and ages out there, and that's all I'm really doing. That's Marcus May, 30 years old. Eddie Jackson, a ball hawk for Chicago, 30 years old as well. Ashton Davis with the Jets, 27 years old, was kind of like a highly prized guy with some speed and traits, might work. And I'm just going to throw this name in there because the Tennessee Titans went out and grabbed him last year, and that's Terrell Edmonds at 28 years old. Not a big fan myself, but maybe they went out and grabbed him on a one-year deal last year because Bowen wanted him. I'm not totally sure, but could be.
I mean, when you're installing a new defense, you want guys who know the system and make that transition easier, whether they're the best, guys, skill set, age, health, all of that stuff.
Sure, when Joe Judge brought in Logan Ryan.
Exactly.
He was someone that knew the New England philosophy.
Right. So you might see a move like that just to get, look, we have 11 guys here learning a new system. It'd be nice to have one or two who kind of know what's going on a little bit more. So again, not every move is made to win a Super Bowl, in 7 years or today. It's moves to get your team in a position to do it. And that would be a move, for a guy like him.
And in the draft, I don't know how far he's going to fall, but Cooper DeJean from Iowa, or DeJean, I don't know how to say it, and I don't care. I was on Talking Giants with Bobby and Justin last year. We did like a way too early 2024. That was one of the guys. I didn't know anything about him. He was listed as a corner on the sheet that they gave me. So I was like, all right, let me look this guy up. And, I'm watching his 2022 film, and I'm like, this dude would make an excellent safety. Oh, my God. I want him he was my favorite guy of all the dudes that we did for that episode. And before we started recording, we're just kind of getting levels and all that stuff, and I'm talking, and Bobby is asking me like who my favorite guy was. I was like, Cooper DeJean, man. He's like, really? I was like, oh yeah, you move him to safety, and he is the man. And he was like, oh yeah, you're talking about moving to safety. Well, lo and behold, here he is. He is listed as a safety everywhere, and he is the consensus top guy. Suffered a pretty gruesome injury at the end of last season, so he was unable to do anything at the combine. I'm not sure if he is going to do anything at a pro day or did anything at a pro day. I'm not sure how ready he is right away, and I don't know how much that injury is going to impact his draft stock, but he is very, very good. I would not say it's 6, but if he were to miraculously tumble to the second round, you run to the podium and run through anybody standing in your way kind of thing. He doesn't belong in the second round, I guess, is what I'm saying. But other than that, there's a couple of guys on day 2, which I think is a little bit more likely, right? If you're looking for a kind of slot cornery kind of safety, Javon Bullard from Georgia is somebody I really like. Was at the Senior Bowl. I believe he was voted best secondary guy on his respective team for the week or whatever. Cam Kinchins from Miami is one that I think a lot of people like. I think he's part of a lot of too high stuff. He might be a great fit for this defense. I'm a little less high on him than other people. He also had a pretty bad injury last year, caused him to miss a couple of games. I think he also can gamble a little too much. The guy I really kind of like in day 2, Kalen Bullock from USC. A lot of speed. He likes to hit like a madman. I really do like watching him. I'm not really sure where he's going to fall. I have him as like a late round 2, early round 3 kind of person. And I think that's a good sweet spot for the Giants to kind of, I mean, they traded away the early round 3 pick, right?
Yes, they did. That was part of the Burns trade, right?
So they have the late round 3 pick that they inherited or something, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, he may be off the table or you may have to reach for him. I'm not really sure, or trade back or something like that. But I would zero in on him. And on my Grump channel pretty soon, I have an edge rusher video came out on Easter Sunday. I'm going to have a tight end video come out on Thursday since we did all that work for last week's episode. And then the safety episode's coming out on Monday. I'm aiming for. It's going to be kind of hard, tight. But
you have no life. You can get it done.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Those are kind of my early draft targets. Still like a month until the draft. Unbelievable, right?
It's 3 weeks from Thursday, I believe.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about that?
You think that's fast? Or you think that's been slow?
Well, the process to me always seems really, really long. But, when you start talking 3 weeks, 3 weeks jumps at you really, really quickly. And
it's hard to ignore the process of starting like in December. You know what I mean? Like the top prospects, if they're not in the championship tournament, they're not going to play in the bowl game. So they're already like declaring and, doing private workouts and all their stuff matters. That's all before New Year's.
Mm-hmm. And when it was Senior Bowl was early January, the combines in late February, early March, all these different things are happening. And yeah, it's a long, long process.
It's a long time to keep having the same Daniel Jones conversation.
Well, it's such a long process where guys jump up and down boards when nothing really is happening. That merits like, oh, it's obvious this quarterback who we thought might have been a mid-second round pick now might be a top 10 pick. It's just we have so much time to think about it and to review tape and swim with all the other sheep, then become your own lone wolf out there. It makes for great content. It gives us something to do in the off season. But I'm ready to see what the picks are, who we have, and let's go.
I am excited for the draft. It's one of my favorite football days of the year. It's every fan feels stoked for their team, even the team that's not going to do anything that year.
It's like opening day in baseball. It's kind of like and even if you're like, oh, I didn't want that guy, well, your team still got better. You just got an increase in talent. No matter who it is that you got, your team theoretically should be better than it was, 5 months earlier.
Unless you're the Jets and you didn't turn in the card on time. Is it the Jets or the Vikings?
I think it was
the Vikings.
Yeah. Boy, what a shithead.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode. We will see you guys pretty soon. Be sure to like, subscribe, tell a friend about the show. I honestly can't wait for the draft, and that's going to be an exciting day. And then we're going to have really nothing to talk about. So that's going to come then
we get into those heavy UFL conversations.
And you get into, how many times have you seen Mr. Baseball and yeah, all those wonderful movie conversation, food arguments, that sort of thing.
We'll have investment tips. Well, it'll be a lot of fun. I'll read the phone book. So all you youngins out there, go look up what a phone book is, and you'll get that joke. Yeah.
Isn't that a? I can't think of his name. Never mind.
Good one.
Thanks. No, who was the comedian from Taxi that he was performing live and everyone wanted him to be the guy from Taxi, so he just started reading books.
Oh, Andy Kaufman?
Andy Kaufman, thank you. I couldn't think of his name.
That sounds like a very Andy Kaufman thing to do, is just read the
phone book. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
David thing also would do. Also,
Yeah.
I don't like this crowd tonight. I'm just gonna read the.
All right. Anyway, we'll see you guys next time. Until then, go
Go
Giants.
Giants.